I let their family use my generator during a blackout. 2 days later, I found my backyard gate torn off and my tools missing. You said we could use what we needed, he smiled. I said nothing, until I found the receipt with my name forged, and that's when I live in Bayonne, New Jersey. Small, crowded streets. Everybody's close together, and everybody kind of pretends not to notice each other unless something happens. This happened last summer, during that awful heat wave that knocked the power out for 3 straight days. I've lived in this house since 2004. Bought it with my wife back when we thought we'd have kids. She passed in 2021. Since then, I've just kept to myself, worked long hours at the garage, and kept the place in shape. I've always been that guy who has everything organized. My garage is basically my second home. I don't drink. I don't go out much. What I have is my tools, my truck, and my routines. That garage? Everything in there has a place. Most of it I bought myself, but a few things were my dad's. He was a machinist. When he died, I brought his old socket set and 2 metal boxes of tools back with me. I don't even use them. I just keep them clean and oiled. So, on day 2 of the blackout, around 9 at night, I'm sitting in the dark with a little fan going, running off my generator. I've got the fridge plugged in and a lamp on in the kitchen. I hear a knock. It's Joe, my neighbor from 2 doors down. He moved in with his wife and kids about 2 years ago. We'd spoken a few times. Friendly enough guy, but we weren't close. He looked hot, tired, and kind of desperate. Hey man, sorry to bug you, he said. Our baby's not doing well in this heat. My wife's freaking out. I saw you had a generator. Would it be okay if we ran an extension cord just for a fan and maybe the baby monitor? I thought about it for a second. It's not like I was using the whole load, and I get it, babies and heat don't mix. Yeah, I told him. Just don't plug in anything heavy.
No actini units.
He smiled, real wide. You're a lifesaver, man.
Seriously.
Thank you. I showed him the outside outlet on the side of the house and told him to run a single cord. He thanked me again, waved, and went back. Next morning, I went out back and noticed my gate latch was off. Not broken, but sitting open like it hadn't been latched. I always latch it. Always. I've got a small yard that backs up to my detached garage. The only people who've ever gone back there are me and my cousin Rob when he helps with repairs. I figured maybe I didn't shut it right. Long week.
No sleep.
I let it go. That night, around 1 a.m., I woke up because of a sound. Metal on metal. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I looked out my bedroom window, but the motion light didn't go off. I figured maybe the wind had knocked something down or a raccoon was messing around. Didn't think much of it. Next morning, I went into the garage to grab something and froze. Half my tools were gone. I stared at the wall for a full minute before I could even process it. The whole top row of wrenches gone. My Milwaukee torque wrench set. 2 jacks. The Bosch cordless drill I saved up for. My dad's socket set. One of the red steel boxes. The lock wasn't broken. The door wasn't kicked in. Whoever took it either had a key or got in through the back. I checked the gate again. That's when I saw it. The hinge had been pulled and bent, like someone yanked the gate off enough to squeeze through. And from the angle of the dirt, they'd done it more than once. I knocked on Joe's door around noon. His wife answered. Said he was at work. I told her I just needed to talk to him when he got home. He came over later that evening, just after sunset. He looked completely casual, like nothing had happened. Hey, what's up, he said. I told him my garage had been broken into, that some tools were missing. He gave me this look, half blank, half amused. Well, he said, you said we could use what we needed. I stared at him. I thought maybe I misheard. What? You said we could plug in and use what we needed, he said again. Figured that covered more than electricity. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Like it was funny. Like we were buddies. Like this was some kind of neighborhood barter system. I didn't say a word. I just shut the door and stood there. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with this weird kind of silent, rising anger that I hadn't felt in years. I called the cops. Filed a report. They were polite, But let's be honest, nothing was going to happen. No forced entry.
No cameras.
No witnesses. Nothing to go on. I didn't have serial numbers for every tool. They basically nodded and said, "Let us know if you hear anything." A few days passed. Then I got a fraud alert email from my credit card company. A Harbor Freight purchase. $1,187.24 on a card I hadn't used in at least 5 months. I drove straight to the Harbor Freight over in Jersey City. Talked to the store manager. Told him I hadn't made any recent purchases and needed to see the receipt. At first, he hesitated. But I had my ID, and he agreed to pull it up. He brought out a printed receipt and a copy of the store camera stills. There was Joe, standing at the register with a cart full of brand new tools, talking to the cashier like it was a regular Tuesday. And on the signature line at the bottom of the receipt, my name, in this ugly, uneven version of my handwriting. He'd actually tried to copy it. That's when something snapped in me. I sat in my truck outside the Harbor Freight parking lot for a long time, just staring at that receipt. My own name, signed by someone else's hand. It felt disgusting. Like someone had reached inside my life and used my face to rob me. The manager had printed the photo stills from the security footage. It was clear as day. Joe, wearing that same ratty gray baseball cap he always wore in the yard. Smiling. Leaning on the cart like he belonged there. I drove home with the receipt in the passenger seat and this pounding in my head that wouldn't stop. I didn't even call the credit card company yet. I just sat in my driveway, gripping the steering wheel and thinking about every time I nodded at that man, every time I waved when his kids were playing in the sprinkler. Every second of that made me feel like an idiot. I filed a police report for fraud that same day. This time, I had evidence. Photos. Receipts. My car number wasn't stolen. It was taken out of my drawer in the house, which meant he'd been inside. That was the part one couldn't shake. He'd been inside my house. I don't keep a gun. Never felt like I needed one. But that week, I went to the hardware store and replaced every lock. I got cameras, floodlights, alarms. I didn't feel safe in my own home. The police came back out when I submitted the fraud report. I gave them the Harbor Freight receipt, the photo stills, and the statement from the manager. They took it more seriously this time. They even said they'd bring Joe in for questioning. 2 days later, Joe's wife came to my door. She looked shaken. "You're really doing this?" she said, her voice low. "Over some tools?" I didn't answer her. She stepped closer. "You could ruin his life. He's got a record. You know that." That stopped me. "No," I said. "I didn't." She folded her arms. "He's been trying to stay clean. He's a good father. He made a mistake." I just stared at her. A mistake? A good father? Breaking into my garage, forging my name, using my credit card? I didn't say a word. I shut the door. That night, someone egged my house. My new camera caught it, 2 teens in hoodies. Not Joe, not his wife. But I had a good guess where they came from. When I sent the footage to the police, they noted it but didn't do much. "Hard to ID from the angle," they said.
Typical.
Then I started digging. I found Joe's old charges.
2 thefts.
1 assault. A brief stint in jail. Nothing violent since, but enough that he'd probably go away for this. So I made a call. Not to the cops. To my cousin Rob in Edison. "I need a favor," I told him. "What kind?" he asked. "The kind where nobody talks about it later." Rob showed up 2 nights later in his old F-150, the one with the dented tailgate and faded U.S. Army sticker. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year, but when he stepped out, he just said, "Where's the problem?" Like we were back in high school. I showed him the garage, pointed out what had been taken, then handed him the receipt and the security stills from Harbor Freight. He looked them over in silence. "He went shopping with your damn name," Rob said, shaking his head. "Ballsy." "I don't want to just call the cops and wait," I said. "I want to hit back, but clean. I want him to know I'm not stupid. I want him scared." Rob grinned, but it wasn't friendly. "I can do scared. We didn't do anything illegal." But we made it very uncomfortable for Joe. Rob printed out 10 copies of the receipt and photo stills. The next day, we slid one into every mailbox on the block. No note, no explanation, just the evidence. Then one under the wiper of Joe's car. One taped to his fence. One slid under the door of the hardware store where he sometimes picked up part-time hours. That evening, I watched from my living room window as Joe stormed up to my porch. "You think this is funny?" he barked. "You think you're clever?" I didn't open the door. I just stood behind the glass and let him shout. "Do you know what you've done?" he yelled. "My kid saw that. My wife's threatening to leave." Still, I didn't move. I watched the way his hands clenched, the way his face turned red.
He wasn't sorry.
He was just caught. He slammed his fist on the door, once, hard enough to rattle it. Then he walked off, muttering something I couldn't hear. The next morning, I found a dead squirrel nailed to my gate. No note. Just the animal, its paws stretched out and nailed down like some twisted message. I called the police again. Showed them the cameras. No clear footage this time. Whoever did it came in from the alley, wearing a hoodie. They logged the incident, but again, nothing came of it. So, I went a different route. I called the regional manager at Harbor Freight. Told him I had proof of fraud and that one of his employees had processed a forged ID and stolen card number. I told him I'd be contacting the local news if something wasn't done. 2 days later, I got a call from corporate. They'd opened an internal investigation. A week after that, I got another call from Joe. He sounded different, quieter, like the wind had been knocked out of him. "Look, man," he said. "I messed up. I know that. But please don't take it further. My job's on the line. My kids, they don't understand what's happening." I let the silence sit for a long time. Then I said, "You should have thought of that when you walked into my house." He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing, waiting for something. But I hung up. And that's when I started planning something permanent. I knew Joe was unraveling when he stopped mowing his lawn. That man used to be obsessive about it, every Saturday, 8 a.m., like clockwork. But after the flyers, after the Harbor Freight call, the grass just sat there. Tall, patchy, wild. Like his whole life was starting to rot from the inside out. Rob called me one night and said, "You want this to be over, or you want him to carry it forever?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was I didn't know. The police weren't doing anything. Not beyond the paperwork. The credit card company eventually cleared the charges, but that didn't fix what was taken. Not the socket set from my dad. Not the keys that I had to replace. Not the feeling of someone walking through my home when I wasn't looking.
So I kept going.
I wrote an anonymous tip to the school board where Joe's wife worked as an aide. Nothing wild, just a polite letter suggesting that a household connected to recent theft and fraud might not be the safest place for kids. I never mentioned names. I just asked questions. 3 weeks later, I saw her loading bags into her car in the middle of a Tuesday. She wasn't wearing her work lanyard anymore. Joe didn't come out much after that. But one afternoon, I caught him outside, dragging 2 garbage cans to the curb. He looked thinner. His eyes were sunken in. I was in my driveway, wiping down my truck.
He paused, looked over at me.
"You done yet?" he asked, voice low, tired. I didn't answer. Just kept cleaning. "I lost my job," he said. "She's staying with her sister now. Kids don't even look at me." Still, I didn't say anything. He stared a second longer, then added, "Hope it was worth it." That's when I looked up. "I haven't even started." He didn't respond, just turned and walked back into his house. That night, Rob called again. "You want to go further?" he asked. "Because I got an idea. Legal. Cold. But it'll leave a mark." I asked what he meant. He said, "We file a lien." "What?" "A civil lien," he said. "We take him to small claims for the stolen tools. For the fraud. You've got receipts, photos, witness statements. Might not get the money back, but if the court awards it, you can put a lien on his house. He'll feel it when he tries to sell, refi, or even pay taxes. It'll hang there for years." I thought about that all night.
It wasn't flashy.
It wasn't loud. It was slow. Quiet.
Permanent.
Exactly what I wanted. Filing the small claims suit was easy. Too easy, really. $2,481 in damages. That was my estimate based on the tool values, the credit card mess, the lock replacements, and some other costs I logged. I attached the receipts, the Harbor Freight photo stills, the store manager's statement, the police report numbers. I didn't need a lawyer. I just needed to show up. The court date landed on a rainy Thursday morning in September. I wore the only decent button-up I owned. Joe showed up late, wearing jeans and a jacket that looked a size too big, like he'd lost weight or borrowed it from someone else. He didn't make eye contact. The judge was an older woman who barely looked up as she scanned the papers. She didn't ask many questions. She read through everything slowly, then said something like, "The documentation is clear. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff."
Just like that.
I walked out without even glancing back. Didn't shake his hand. Didn't wait for him to say anything. I just walked to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and let the rain hit the windshield while I stared at the paper in my hand. I'd won. But it didn't feel like a win. 2 weeks later, the lien was filed against his property. He'd get notified by mail. It wouldn't take anything from him right away, but it would wait there, sitting quietly, waiting for the day he tried to move on, tried to get out, tried to sell or borrow. It was like planting a landmine. He wouldn't feel it now, but one day it would go off. A month passed, then another. I didn't see his kids anymore. Their bikes disappeared from the front yard. His wife never came back. Sometimes I'd see him in the window, watching me from behind the curtain while I mowed, or worked on my truck, or just stood outside with a coffee. Then one night, I heard a noise. Not like the time before. Not quiet. This was loud. Breaking glass. I jumped up, grabbed my phone, hit the camera feed. Backyard clear. Front clear. Side alley clear. I stepped out onto the porch. That's when I saw it. My garage window shattered and spray painted across the door in big black letters. Thief. I stood there, heart thudding, staring at the word. He'd flipped the story. To him, I was the thief now. I'd taken his reputation, his job, his family, his chance at starting over. And in some twisted part of his brain, that made him the victim. I filed another report, called the cops. They came, took photos, asked if I had footage. I didn't, the one blind spot the cameras had. They nodded, filed it, and left. Nothing ever came of it. But I knew it was him. I just didn't know yet how far he'd go. 3 nights after the garage was tagged, I came home to find my mailbox ripped off the post and tossed halfway down the street. My trash cans had been overturned too, but it was the mailbox that stuck with me. It wasn't just vandalism. It felt personal, like a warning. I didn't even bother calling the cops this time. Instead, I printed out a copy of the court judgment and taped it inside a clear sleeve right on the garage door, covering the spot where the paint had been. I wanted him to see it every time he looked out his window. I wanted him to remember. This wasn't over just because he was angry. 2 days later, I saw him. Not in his yard. Not watching from the window. He was behind my house. I caught it on a live feed from the side yard cam, him walking slow, ducked low near the fence. It was maybe 2 a.m. I was up because I couldn't sleep, and I'd gotten into the habit of checking the cameras every night. I grabbed my phone and called the police while I watched him try the gate. He pulled on the latch hard. It didn't give. I'd reinforced it weeks ago. Then he moved out of frame. By the time the cops showed up, he was gone. They looked around, took a statement, checked the footage. Still no arrest. Still no action. The next morning, I drove to his house and left one thing on his porch, a copy of the camera screenshot, printed and laminated, with the time and date circled in red. No note. No name. Just the image. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't. I was something worse. I was ready. 2 weeks passed without anything happening. Then one night, Rob called me. Said he'd been scrolling Facebook and came across something weird. It was a GoFundMe. Title: Help Us Keep Our Family Home. victims of harassment and retaliation. The story? A twisted version of the truth. According to the Post, Joe had been generous during the blackout, and then I'd supposedly turned on him out of nowhere, dragging him through court, slandering him to his wife's job, draining a struggling father just trying to make ends meet. There were even photos of his kids, looking sad on the porch. The kicker? The fundraiser had already hit $3,000. People were sharing it,
Commenting.
calling him brave, asking how they could help. And right there, buried in the middle of the story, was my name. Not full, but enough. Our neighbor Derek, the bitter mechanic next door, who couldn't let go of the past. I didn't know what made me feel sicker, the lies, or the fact that people believed them. That's when Rob said something I hadn't thought about before. What if this was his plan the whole time? I asked what he meant. All of it, Rob said. The generator, the tools, getting caught, playing the victim. Maybe this isn't desperation. Maybe it's strategy. And suddenly I couldn't shake it. What if Joe wasn't spiraling? What if this was just Act 2? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Rob's words. What if this was all a plan? What if every time I thought he was losing control, his job, his wife, his sanity, he was just setting the stage to flip the narrative? The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. He knew exactly what he was doing when he came to my door that night asking for help with the generator. He saw what I had. He saw that I lived alone. He watched how I locked up. Maybe even saw where I kept my spare keys. Maybe even walked through my house the night I left the kitchen door unlocked by mistake. That's when I went back through my camera logs. I started combing through the cloud storage, checking every night I'd written off as nothing. And I found it. 3 weeks before the blackout. 1:30 a.m. A figure walking through my backyard. Slow, careful. He didn't go near the garage. He went straight to the side of the house, near the kitchen door. And then he vanished behind the blind spot. I hadn't noticed it before. It was the middle of summer. I was still awake most nights. But that night I'd taken a sleeping pill. I remembered it clearly. He had been casing me. And when the blackout hit, that wasn't bad luck. That was opportunity. I didn't tell Rob right away. I needed to think. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about tools or a forged receipt anymore. This was something deeper. Something worse. This man had studied me, entered my home, lied to my face, then built a whole false life around the idea that he was the one being wronged. And people believed him. That made it dangerous. Not just because of what he might do next, but because I was starting to doubt myself. I'd always seen myself as calm,
Fair.
careful. But this man had dragged me into something else. Something uglier. I'd done things I never thought I'd do. I'd turned cold,
Calculated.
vengeful, and I didn't know if I could come back from that. I sat in my garage that night, door open, one light on, and looked at the empty spots on the wall where my tools used to hang. I thought about what I was going to do next. I could press forward with the lien. I could contact GoFundMe with the proof of fraud and lies. I could send every document to every donor who commented with support.
Or
I could go quiet. Let it sit. Let him live with it. Let the truth eat through his perfect little story like rot behind the walls. But then I remembered something. A line Joe said the day he stood on my porch and smirked like it was all a joke. You said we could use what we needed. He really believed that. He believed I was just another resource. Another door to open. Another tool in his box. And I wasn't sure what scared me more, the fact that he thought that, or the fact that I'd almost let him. I haven't seen him in weeks now. The fundraiser disappeared. The house is quiet. Sometimes I still expect to hear his kids laughing in the yard, or his wife yelling through the screen door. But it's just silence now. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. And every time I walk into the garage and see those empty hooks, I don't think about the money, or the tools, or even the lies. I just think about how close I came to becoming the kind of man he already believed I was. And the worst part is, I'm still not sure I didn't.